Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Welcome to this Tuesday edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. My name is V. Ravi Kumar and with me is my Hindi co-anchor Nikhil Kumar.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत है। रोज की तरह आज भी हम देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक तथा शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार आपके लिए लेकर आए हैं। उन पर हम चर्चा भी करेंगे और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ में है रवि।
At the stock market, Sensex gains 37 points, Nifty ends flat, Rupee weakens 33 paise. Maruti Suzuki's India's quarterly net profit more than doubles to 2,351 crore rupees, and business confidence index rises to 126.6 in the third quarter of this fiscal.
शेयर बाजार में सेंसेक्स में 37 अंक की बढ़त, निफ्टी बिना किसी खास उतार चढ़ाव के बंद हुआ, रुपया 33 पैसे कमजोर। भारत में मारुति सुजुकी का तिमाही शुद्ध लाभ दोगुने से अधिक 2,351 करोड़ रुपए और बिजनेस कॉन्फिडेंस इंडेक्स चालू वित्त वर्ष की तीसरी तिमाही में बढ़त के साथ 126.6 पर। शुरुआत करते हैं सेंसेक्स के साथ में। घरेलू शेयर बाजार में बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज की प्रमुख 30 कंपनियों का सर्वोच्च सूचकांक 60,900 से ऊपर जाकर बंद हुआ, जबकि नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज में सूचीबद्ध 50 प्रमुख कंपनियों का सूचकांक 18,100 से अधिक के स्तर पर पहुंचा। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स आज 37 अंक ऊपर चढ़कर 60,979 दर्ज हुआ। उधर नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी बिना किसी खास उतार चढ़ाव के 18,118 पर बंद हुआ। विस्तारित बाजार की ओर चलें तो छोटी और मझोली कंपनियों के शेयर में नरमी आई। बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स 0.3% और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स में मामूली 0.4% की बढ़त दर्ज हुई।
The stock markets, the Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange gained 37 points to close at 60,979. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange ended flat at 18,118. In the broader market, the BSE Mid-Cap Index shed 0.3% and the Small Cap Index fell 0.4%. Among sectoral indices on the BSE, the Auto Index was the biggest gainer, climbing 1.2%. The IT and the Consumer Discretionary Index rose 0.7% each, and the Tech and the Consumer Durables Index gained 0.5% each. Among the declining indices, the Services and the Metal Index dropped 1.2% each, the Realty and the Healthcare Index lost 1% each, the Industrial, Capital Goods, Power, Utilities, Telecom and the Commodities Index declined 0.8% each, the Bankex fell 0.5% and the Oil and Gas Index shed 0.3%.
और हमारे साथ चर्चा के लिए जुड़ चुके हैं आर्थिक विशेषज्ञ जयंता दास, जिनसे हम बातचीत करेंगे। हेलो जयंता जी, कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत है।
शुक्रिया। Jayanta, if you look at the market in January, out of the 17 trading days so far, I think 8 have been positive, although today was marginally positive, but still will be counted as positive, and the remaining have been negative. So it's almost like one day it's up, one day it's down. And if you see the end of December last closing of Nifty and Sensex, currently Nifty and Sensex are roughly at the same figure, marginally up you might say. And generally it has been seen in the last 10-15 years, the month before the budget, you have seen that the market is generally 1% down. So do you think this month also on the last trading day we would see the similar pattern? And what do you expect from the budget?
See, typically Ravi, the January month always has been a bit choppy, if not volatile. Volatile is a much more stronger scenario. But there has been inconsistencies. Always traditionally, if you check out the January figures for the last 15-20 years. And although the budget has been, preponed to first Feb for some years now, but if you look at once again, typically this is also the calendar month, whereby new investments, new positions, and squaring up of existing positions happen globally. As a result of which, FIIs and FIs typically resettle and recalculate their overall investments in Asian markets as well as in European markets. So that's the other reason of the choppiness. Now coming back to your query about pre-budget choppiness, I think there would be some inconsistency happening till the budget comes out. Budget is hardly a few days away. And at this point of time, what's important to understand is two things. One is there is, as I said, a global recession. Although the U.S. markets, if you typically look for yesterday's movement and how the markets closed, it knocked out the pressure. But at the end of the day, there is a recession, and as you know, last 7 to 10 days, overwhelmingly the job losses in the tech industry, specifically starting with Google, Microsoft, across the board, has been weighing on very heavily. Now, Indians are also losing jobs, dime a dozen every day, but it has to be seen to what extent this comes out in the ground reaction in a much more emphasized manner in Indian markets, because as I said earlier in your previous programs with you also, this is something which you can't hide from. The only thing is it takes time to filter down and then actually establish its recession. So this is what we look forward to. But having said so, what also has to be understood is this is one of the key budgets to be before 2024, and where the present Prime Minister has already, made a legal call asking for 400 days to the election. So that's something in keeping in mind. So this budget, I do expect a lot of, political overtures also happening out in the budget. That will take care of voter concerns, that will be taken care of how election concerns are to be met. Because this is the last big budget which you have, by which time you'll have around 12 to 14 months to play out before the elections happen.
Jayant, I was looking at the data. I'm finding that the FPIs are selling IT and financial stocks, whereas you see some other fund managers quite bullish about financials. Of course, financials is a very important part of Nifty as well as Sensex, almost I think 30-35% weightage in both. In that scenario, I mean, financials is something where you see a dichotomy. Some of the people are bullish on financials, some are not. As I mentioned, FPIs are not. Where do you weigh in on this?
Well, this is typically what happens when people take positions based on how they figure out the consolidated situation should be for the next 6 to 8 months. And as I said, there is no specific directives or established directives in the financial services sector as of now. Because on one hand, the fast flow rate of increase in the interest rate would be tapering down hopefully in the next 3 to 4 months. So that tapering down is somewhere in the horizon already visible. It's not a scenario where we are uncertain yet how long this particular rate of rate hike will continue. So that's one part which augurs well for the financial services sector also to come in with some sort of renewed energy. But having said so, if you have a recessionary, as I said, if you have a recessionary thing in the horizon, so it all depends on what your position is and how you foresee this particular thing as an investor, or even in that case as a fund manager. And hence we see a dichotomous view when it comes to investment or disinvestment, either way, in the financial services sector. But then, you have rightly pointed out, it's a 35% weightage which the financial services have. And obviously stocks, or the indices rather, if not the stocks, the indices would give a good swing in that case. If in case, the buyers, the sellers outshine the buyers.
जयंत, आपसे ये पूछना चाहूंगा कि जहां तक रॉ मटेरियल की बात है, देश में रॉ मटेरियल की कॉस्ट पर काफी हद तक लगाम लगाकर रखी गई है और जिसका फायदा जो मैन्युफैक्चरर है उनको भी मिला है, और इसके बाद जो जहां पर शेयर मार्केट की बात आती है वहां पर लोगों ने इसका भी फायदा उठाया है. और एक और चीज इसमें मैं जोड़ना चाहूंगा कि निफ्टी ने 18,100 का जो लेवल पा लिया है, कहीं ना कहीं ये जो इन्वेस्टर्स हैं उनके मन में एक पॉजिटिव ये भाव रखता है. आप क्या कहेंगे इस पर?
देखिए, मार्केट का जो दौर रहा है, अगर आप पिछले करीबन 12 हफ्ता के बात करें
जी,
में खास करके जो हेवी वेट्स है मार्केट में, खास करके सेंसेक्स बेस्ड स्टॉक्स अगर आप देखें या लार्ज कैप स्टॉक देखें, उसमें दौर काफी अच्छा रहा. लेकिन ब्रॉड बेस ऑफ द मार्केट अगर आप देखें, और उसमें खास करके आप अगर 1 साल का एक कंपैरिजन करें, में मिड कैप स्टॉक्स, स्मॉल कैप स्टॉक्स में किसी न किसी तरह से गिरावट आया है, यानी 1 या 5% का बीच में उसका रिटर्न आया है. तो ये जरूर है कि सेंसेक्स का स्तर अगर आप अलग से उसको ऊपर चर्चा करें, अगर आपको लगे हाँ काफी अच्छा है, लेकिन दिस इज जस्ट द टॉप. समझना है कि मार्केट में ब्रॉड बेस रैली, जहाँ पे हर खुदरा निवेशक जो है उसमें पैसा कमाया कि नहीं, कितना कमाया, ये सारी चीजें हमें समझने के लिए मार्केट का अगर आप 1 साल का, जैसे मैंने बोला, कंपैरिजन करें तो उसमें उतना आंकड़े अच्छे नहीं है, नहीं है, उत्साहजनक भी नहीं है. लेकिन ये मानते हुए भी अगर टॉप लाइन में मार्केट में खास करके लार्ज कैप इंडेक्सेस में, आप जैसे अपने मारुति का कितना अच्छा रिजल्ट अपने अनाउंस किए, टेक्नोलॉजी शेयर्स का रिजल्ट लगातार 3-4 बड़े कंपनी का आया हुआ है, एक कंपनी छोड़ के बाकी सबका काफी अच्छा, बियॉन्ड एक्सपेक्टेशन, उम्मीद से भी ज्यादा नतीजे आए हुए. तो ये सारी चीजें देखते हुए मैं मानता हूँ कि लार्ज कैप क्षेत्र में अच्छे कंपनीज में निवेश करते हुए अगर इस साल का अगर आपका इन्वेस्टमेंट जो स्ट्रेटजी होता है, आपका निवेश का जो नीति होता है, वो अगर आप सही रूप से दोहराएंगे तो काफी अच्छा रिटर्न, यानी कि आज का तारीख में अच्छा रिटर्न मतलब 9 से लेकर 16% तक अगर मार्केट परफॉर्मेंस कर सकते हैं
जी,
तो मिल सकता है। साथों साथ ये भी है कि ब्याज दर खास करके फिक्स डिपॉजिट्स में सबको पता है 7 से लेकर 8% के बीच में ज्यादातर बैंक सबको ब्याज दर इस वक्त दे रहे हैं, तो वहां पर भी कुछ पोर्टफोलियो आप एलोकेट करने का कोशिश करिए। और गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड्स का जो क्षेत्र है इंडस्ट्री में खास करके अगर हम देखें ये पिछले 4-5 महीने के दौरान गोल्ड में काफी उत्तेजन अलग से आया हुआ है और गोल्ड का दर भी तेजी रूप से बढ़ रहा है। तो और देखा जाए जनवरी, फरवरी, अप्रैल ये सारे महीने तक गोल्ड का दौर चलेगा क्योंकि बिजी सीजन होता है, बाइंग सीजन होता है। तो और ऊपर से गोल्ड का ऊपर प्रेशर भी अच्छा है, अपवर्ड प्रेशर रादर गोल्ड में जो मोमेंटम इस वक्त गोल्ड में है उसको बरकरार पाने के लिए। तो ओवरऑल इस तरह का अगर आप एक पोर्टफोलियो क्रिएट करें, बेशक मैं मानता हूँ इस बाजार में भी आने वाला 12 महीने का जो अनिश्चितता का हम बात कर रहे हैं, हम का बात कर रहे हैं, हम जॉब लॉसेस का बात कर रहे हैं, इस बाजार में भी आप एक मोटी तौर से किसी न किसी तरह से इंसुलेट होके आप अपना जो भी निवेश है उसमें रिटर्न जो है एक मॉडरेट टू हायर एवरेज रिटर्न आपको मिल सकता है।
एक चीज और आपसे पूछना चाहूंगा, 2020, 21 और 22 की जहां तक हम बात करते हैं तो रेलवे के सेक्टर में सरकार ने बहुत सारे प्रयास किए हैं, कई सारी स्कीम्स लॉन्च की हैं और काफी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर भी इसका डेवलप हो चुका है और इसका फायदा जो निवेशक हैं जो रेल सेक्टर में निवेश करते हैं उन्हें भी काफी फायदा हुआ है और बजट में भी काफी उम्मीदें की जा रही हैं कि रेलवे को और भी बहुत कुछ अभी मिलने की संभावना है। आप इस बाजार को, रेल सेक्टर से जुड़े हुए शेयर बाजार को किस तरह से देखते हैं?
देखिए, अगर कोई ये मतलब आज से 5 साल पहले अगर ये वक्त होता, नॉर्मली हम लोग इस वक्त रेल बजट के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, सरकार ने रेल बजट खत्म करके मर्ज कर दिया है रेल और नॉर्मल बजट के साथ, एक साथ हम सबको पता है
जी।
लेकिन मैं सिर्फ रेलवे बजट में अपना टिप्पणी सीमित नहीं रखूंगा, मैं ओवरऑल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर की बात करें जहां पे रेलवे का भी बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा होते हैं, उसमें अगर बात करें तो 3 मौजूदा चीज है। एक तो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का सरकार का शुरू से जब से ये सरकार आया हुआ है 2014 से एक अलग से फोकस रहा, सड़कें, साथ में नदिया का जो भी अपने इनलैंड वाटर चैनल्स है और तीसरा रेलवेज हो, ये सारे चीजों के ऊपर अलग से ध्यान रखते हुए टेक्नोलॉजी अपग्रेडेशन को पूरी तरह से खर्चा करते हुए वो देश को और नजदीक ले आने का कोशिश करेंगे, एक गांव से दूसरा गांव को और नजदीक ले आने का कोशिश किया जाएगा। उस दौरान हम सबको पता है कि सड़क का तरफ हाईवेज, नेशनल हाईवेज, स्टेट हाईवेज में जिस रफ्तार से काम हुए हैं और आजकल हम हाईवेज, पहले हम बात करते थे हाईवेज मेंटेनेंस का, आजकल हम एक्सप्रेसवेज का बात कर रहे हैं और साथ में कितना घंटा का बचत हो रहा है उस तरह का बात कर रहे हैं। यानी कि जो डायलॉग है हाईवेज का वो काफी हद तक वो चेंज हो गया डायलॉग। अगर आप देखें तो हम पहले बात करते थे कि भाई मेंटेनेंस का पैसा कहाँ से आएंगे, नया हाईवे कहाँ पे बनेंगे, आज का तारीख में एक्सप्रेसवे में कितना घंटा कम होगा, ये नैरेटिव चल रहा है। तो ये मैं मानता हूँ एक बहुत बड़ा उछाल समझा रहा है हमें देश का, जहाँ पे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के रूप से, बुनियादी ढांचागत के रूप से जो उन्नति हुआ है वो काफी हद तक आगे बढ़ा हुआ है। अब आता है रेलवेज में। रेलवेज में रोलिंग स्टॉक है, यानी कि ट्रेन वगैरह जो भी बन रहा है नया टेक्नोलॉजी रूप से, हम सबको पता है
जी।
मेजर सिटीज कनेक्ट करने के लिए अलग से ट्रेन क्रिएट किया जा रहा है, जहाँ पे उस ट्रेन को टिपिकली 30 to 40% ट्रेवलिंग टाइम जो है ट्रेन में वो कम किया जा रहा है। और सबसे अच्छी बात है इस ट्रेन का जो उत्पादन है नया टेक्नोलॉजी के साथ, ये उत्पादन भी देश में हो रहा है। पहले हम लोग ये सारे इंपोर्ट करते थे। तो बेशक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर में जो कमिटमेंट रहा, उस कमिटमेंट के रूप से जो निवेश रहा वो निवेश लगातार चले आ रहा है। और एज ए इन्वेस्टमेंट ऑल्सो अगर आप देखें, सिंस ये मार्केट मंत्र प्रोग्राम है, हम निवेश के बारे में बात करते हैं, रेलवेज, हाईवेज, इनके साथ जुड़े हुए जितना कंपनीज है इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर रूप से जो सपोर्ट करता है इस कंपनीज को, जो कहीं ना कहीं वेंडर्स बने हुए, वो सारे कंपनीज में अगर आप प्रवेश करें, निवेश करें इस वक्त, तो मैं मानता हूँ कि काफी अच्छा मॉडरेट रिटर्न्स मिलेगा। हालांकि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर कंपनी में रिटर्न्स उस तरह का तीव्र गति से नहीं आते, लेकिन दे आर सेफ रिटर्न्स मोर और लेस। जी, एक क्षेत्र है, मैं मानता हूँ हमारा निवेशक बेशक देख सकता है।
Right, and this is the earnings season, and one particular earning input that we've got, which seems to have surprised a lot of people, is Maruti Suzuki. Maruti Suzuki India's net profit for the third quarter of this fiscal more than doubled year on year to 2,351 crore rupees. Revenue from operations rose nearly 25% to 29,044 crore rupees. Operating profit, calculated as earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization, surged 82% year-on-year. The operating margin improved by a sharp 304 basis points to 9.75%. After several quarters, Maruti Suzuki India got relief on the raw material cost front. Input costs rose just about 2% on year. Raw material cost as a percentage of the net sales dropped by 310 basis points on year, that's 3.1%, and improved realization, favorable foreign exchange variation, softening commodity prices and cost efficiencies, and also non-operating income led to the sharp improvement in margins and offset the higher sales promotion expenses incurred in the quarter. The total sales volume in the third quarter increased 8% to 4.66 lakh units. The domestic sales increased 10.5% in the same quarter, but exports fell nearly 5%. Janta, the auto sector, Maruti Suzuki seems to have a cumulative sales of almost 2.5 million last year, and they have pending customer orders of almost 3,63,000 vehicles. And today we also saw TVS Motors Q3 net profit surging by 28%, where the EV sales has surged by 80%. So how do you see the auto sector in the light of these earnings? Are these a flash in the pan, or is there something more than meets the eye?
No, auto actually, as I said earlier, one of the worst hit sectors during COVID time, specifically along with the travel and the hospitality industry. So coming out from those scenarios, specifically taking care of their inventories which piled up during the COVID season. And secondly, we also were aware of the huge, blow they had because of the conductor shortages, the chip shortages rather, sorry. So that's also another factor. Now, riding a wave on these factors, what we have seen is post-COVID, say 14 months, 15 months down the line, we have a particular sector almost at a boom stage. And right now, we all know across the products that there's a huge product variations and availability in terms of new market focuses. The auto industry, I believe, is personally going through a major tectonic change and a huge technology jump which requires lots and lots of investment. Petrol and diesel cars by 2030 is something which we might not be discussing maybe, say, as short as 6 years around from now. There is an EV market which is gradually taking shape in India, and most of the automobile manufacturers are focusing on that, which once again requires investment. So overall, there is a lot of buzz. But then what I also believe is, despite the good results, what's important to understand is auto industry is a highly price elastic industry, price sensitive industry too, because what typically happens is the discounts over the last 3 to 4 months in the auto industry is almost vanished. As in the behavior, even if you're buying a 5 lakh car or a 70 lakh car or even a 1 crore car. Now, the discounts have vanished means there is obviously a huge demand in the horizon as a result of which the automobile manufacturers have stopped away with the doing discounts. The delivery lines have increased. So this is, while it creates a lot of energy and excitement in the market, but in the middle term, it also creates a huge risk factor for the industry. Because if it piles on with a specific, drastic shortage in terms of people losing jobs and all of a sudden, people canceling their bookings and all, this scenario can get overturned, overnight, in a matter of 4 to 6 weeks, So that's a critical juncture which the auto industry is standing at this point of time. Having said so, what I also believe is there should be a huge focus by the government in this particular budget on the EV part, where actually the government should stand up and get rid of, taxes in the EV sector if they really want to make it a huge jump from a takeoff path. We have, at a sustained manner, over the last couple of years, created an EV market, created an EV demand in the market. There are a lot of charging stations coming up across the country and things like that. But we need to have a takeoff stage where typically you make that big leap to ensure that, and if I may use what Mr. Nitin Gadkari has told us around 1.5 to 2 years ago, that the prices of diesel cars, petrol cars and EV will all be in the same bracket. I think that's something which the government should bring in immediately, and that would create a new niche in the market. Not only in terms of a bit of energy saving, although it's a huge debate of how much of energy we are actually saving in electric cars, given that 70% of our production in electricity is to coal. But then, once again, a new technology, lesser emissions and things like that. But that's something which I think the whole auto industry should be looking forward to at this point of time.
और अब एशियाई शेयर बाजारों के बारे में श्रोताओं को बता दें तो एशियाई शेयर बाजारों में आज ज्यादातर बाजार 9 वर्ष के अवकाश के कारण बंद रहे। वहीं भारत में विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में ₹33 कमजोर हुआ और 81.72 प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर बंद हुआ।
If you look at the US markets on Wall Street, key indices ended sharply higher yesterday, fueled by surging technology stocks as investors began an earnings-heavy week with renewed enthusiasm for market-leading momentum stocks. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 254 points or 0.8% to end at 33,630. The S&P 500 gained 47 points or 1.2% to close at 4,020, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq led the pack, boosted by semiconductor shares climbing 224 points or 2% to 11,364. Meanwhile, financial markets have priced in a 99.9% likelihood of a 25 basis points hike to the Fed funds target rate at the conclusion of its two-day monetary policy meeting next Wednesday, according to CME's Fed Watch tool. The fourth quarter reporting season has shifted into overdrive, with 57 of the companies in the S&P 500 having posted results. Of those, 63% have delivered better than expected earnings, according to Refinitiv. On the economic front, the U.S. Commerce Department is expected to unveil its initial advance take on the fourth quarter GDP on Thursday, which analysts expect to land at 2.5%. Very interesting times for the U.S. market ahead, Jayanto. If you look at the Fed funds target rate, which most people expect to go to up to 5% by June this year. The other thing is that starting Tuesday, Microsoft, the earnings season for largely the tech stocks will start. So Tuesday, Microsoft will come and the others will follow. Amazon and all will follow in February. And these Microsoft, Amazon and all these 3-4 stocks put together almost 20% of S&P 500, and of course a much larger share of Nasdaq. So, and most of these stocks have been beaten down in the last 1 year. How do you see the prognosis for the US market going forward?
Well, it's in a very strange juncture, specifically, and for me, it's a juxtaposition of where, you have a little bit of upbeatness in the tech stocks on the backdrop of a very gloomy scenario of thousands of people losing their jobs where they are. So that's a dichotomy which I guess one, as an investor, needs to stand up and understand, and secondly, as a company, this is also something which they would like to ponder on. But having said so, what I believe is this year is not going to be an easy year. And I'm quoting almost all the tech giants and their global leaders who have been, taking a cue of the reasons of these job losses and all. And having said that, Ravi, if you look at the last 5 to 7 years, or even a decade, I don't think we have seen such a heavy job loss ever happening across all the tech giants. So that's something to be of consideration. A bit away from our business stories, we have seen 2 major shootouts happening in California last 3 days. And I was told one of them was because he was bereaved of losing his job or someone in his family losing his job. So these are difficult times, despite the little bullishness which we saw in the market in terms of attractive tech stocks. But investors with investors, there is always a thirst for good money. And as I said, anything which they believe is a bit cheap, everyone sinks in together to bring that particular stock up in the front, buy it out, and move it up. But at the end of the day, fundamentals is going to what goes last. And let's see how the tech giants bring in their results from next week onwards. And that will give us at least a picture of how it's going to be for the next 1 year.
So, Jayanto, any Indian investor looking for geographic diversification, normally they go to US. At this moment, would you say US is a good geographical diversification option, or is it Japan, or is it Eurozone? What, in your opinion, would be the ideal geographical diversification for 2023?
Ravi, so I would strongly suggest and advise to stick to the domestic market and try to grasp on companies which you understand and you believe, and companies which you're comfortable with. US markets at this point of time, at least for the next 2 quarters, even if you find cheap stocks, it's something which you can abstain from, and because let them settle down in terms of what is happening over there.
Right. Let's move on to the next story that we're tracking, the NCAER NSE Business Confidence Indexes. That's something that has been happening since 1991, which covers 500 firms across 4 regions, was higher at 126.6 in the third quarter of 2022-23 compared to the year ago's level of 124.4. The economic think tank NCAER said business confidence has recovered from the lows of the pre-pandemic and the following 2 pandemic years. The NCAER also informed that sentiments continued to soften sequentially in the first, second and third quarters of 2022-23. The National Council of Applied Economic Research, NCAER, further said sentiments relating to macro conditions remained relatively buoyant in the third quarter of 2022-23 as compared to the second. The share of positive responses increased deliveries for the component. Overall, economic conditions will improve in the next 6 months and remain unchanged for the component. Present investment climate is positive. So how do you see this marginal 124.4 to 126.6 improvement in the business confidence index? And also please comment on the sentiments continued to soften sequentially in the first, second and third quarters.
Well, this is a survey, and obviously, given the present environment, I think I didn't see this report, but I think I almost mirrored a similar view in the first 15 minutes of the program in terms of how we pan into for the next 2 to 3 weeks, despite the good strides which we made in specific sectors, including automobile in India, including highways and infrastructure sectors and things like that. So I think it's completely in tandem with what is happening at this point of time. The good thing is to understand is there's no overzealousness among the business confidence indexes at this point of time in India, which is something very good to fall back on, because this is something which people would like to ride through. And obviously, the fact that there has been a sharp jump from the business confidence index levels than what was in COVID years, which is quite obviously an obvious factor, because people are now believing that markets can shape up, markets are more resilient. We had a bit of a China shock in December, as you would be remembering, last month. But then once again, we withstood that shock also for a brief period. So, as I said, this is something which we have to ride through and ride on. And I think the business confidence index, which is a survey, is basically what most of the 500 companies are performing.
Right. So let's move on and look at oil prices. Global crude oil prices were steady today as concerns about a global economic slowdown and expected build-up in U.S. oil inventories were offset by hopes of a fuel demand recovery from top importer China. So the Brent crude futures shed 30 cents to trade at $87.89 a barrel, and the U.S. crude futures fell 35 cents to $81.27 a barrel. Oil is very interesting. The International Energy Agency couple of days back had forecast record oil demand. In fact, the fuel demand recovery from China has created a kind of situation where US is very worried about inflation. So the Fed rate hike would have an impinging effect on that, whereas China reopening could actually fuel inflation. So how do you see these two things playing out?
Well, in terms of oil, I think once again, a product which is loaded with inconsistencies. And as it always happens, when there is a demand pull, there is a supply push all of a sudden trying to stabilize the prices. But even if China opens up with a monstrous vengeance in terms of how they've been producing and things like that, while US may be worried, I don't see a huge fluctuating oil price at these levels. Yes, there would be some decent climbs, but I don't see a fluctuating or a runaway jump in oil prices.
और अब सोने पर नजर डालें। मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में सोना अंतर दिवसीय कारोबार में 295 रुपए महंगा होकर 57,217 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर चल रहा था, जबकि चांदी 63 रुपए की गिरावट के साथ 68,779 रुपए प्रति किलो पर चल रही थी। जयंता, बहुत ही कम शब्दों में सोने पर आपके विचार। जयंता, आप सुन पा रहे हैं?
Hello.
Jayanta, could you call?
I've always said would fetch you returns, and this is the time to hold on to your gold. Because I do see an upward movement in the next 6 months from here on, even at this 57,000 level.
So there was that old song, Sona Lai Ja Re, Chandi Lai Ja Re. So would you say both Sona and Chandi are equally good, or would you bet on Sona more than Chandi?
Gold at this point of time rather than, the other metals.
Okay. So today, as we saw, that silver had declined and gold had gone up, but normally both move in tandem. That's what we have seen.
Exactly. Normally in the metals market, that has been the trend.
बिल्कुल जयंता, हमसे बात करने के लिए और चर्चा करने के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत हम शुक्रिया अदा करते हैं।
Thank you, Jayanto, for joining us and giving your comments on the stories that we covered in this edition of Market Mantra. Before we close this edition of Market Mantra, a reminder of the headlines that we covered. At the stock markets, Sensex gains 37 points, Nifty and flat, Rupee weakens 33 paise, Maruti Suzuki India's quarterly net profit more than doubles 2,351 crore rupees, and business confidence index rises to 126.6 in the third quarter of this fiscal. That's all that we have in this edition of Market Mantra. Namaskar.
नमस्कार।
Market Mantra, Mantra. Market Mantra.